All right, I think I'm live. Who starts their live stream on time? This guy does, or at least most of the time I do. I'm going to give people just a few minutes to go ahead and wander in here. In the meantime, I did so much prep before starting up this live stream here to make sure that my audio and my video were synced up and that my video was streaming more or less smoothly. So if y'all can chime off in the chat, let me know that you can hear me loud and clear. Let me know that my words are synchronized up with my video, because it's entirely possible that I did a bunch of adjustments the wrong way, um, as I didn't have a good method for really kind of testing how this would go on your end. So if y'all could please sound off in the comments here. Let me know that you're seeing me loud and clear. That'd be lovely. Let me know that you're alive and out there. So have to grab my poi for the evening. That's always helpful and important. All right, so let me think here. What colors do I want my poi to be tonight? Sonic Hill says, we're live and hear you loud and clear. Fantastic. Adam Knox says, sounds and looks good to me. That's wonderful to hear. So, trying to think here. So I've been watching, I've been re-binging Young Justice of late, and I think that Miss Martian is probably my favorite character on the show. So I'm gonna do red and green for my colors tonight. I think do Miss Martian colors. Are there any other Young Justice fans out there? Whilst I dial in my modes for the evening. I guess technically they're also Christmas colors, but I'm going to think of them as being Miss Martian colors tonight. What can I say? So I said red and green. Baller. And let's do up the handles in opposite colors here, because why not? Where's everybody joining me from tonight? Let me know in the chat here while I stick in these settings. I, of course, am coming to you from Washington, D.C., or um, technically about 300 feet over the line into Maryland, but I still think it counts. Part of the metro area. I definitely get on get on the metro heading into DC quite a lot. So Tina Pipi Ditvilson is from Denmark. With a name like that, I would assume so. I'm actually Scandinavian myself, but I'm a Finn. So it's that Nordic country where the language is not related to any of the other Nordic countries, unfortunately. So I have no idea how to understand. It's Danish, right? Um, Adam Knox says greetings from Germany. Hello from Washington D.C. Cal Montgomery's coming at us from Western Pennsylvania. Welcome all. Tina Pippi Ditlevsen says, well pronounced, actually. Great. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I actually just finished binge watching. It's on HBO Max in the United States. It's a Norwegian series called Beforeigners, and I want to say that there's one or two Danish characters on there. It's really a trip watching a sci-fi show that's not in English. Not the least of which because one of the leads is actually a Finn, but she doesn't speak Finnish at all in the course of the show. So unfortunately, what little Finnish I know is of no help to me whatsoever in watching it. It's an intriguing premise though, and I really like the way they set it up. Binging a lot of shows lately between Foreigners and Young Justice. What can I say? Cool. So, dear friends, I'm going to give everybody just a minute or two more to filter on in here. Let me give you the breakdown of how our evening is going to go here. I have a little lesson, some tech tips that I'm going to be giving you all in the course of this. Um, It'll probably be like a half an hour's worth of lesson, and then I'm going to switch over to doing Q&A for our final half an hour. So it is 7:05 where I am right now. So I'm going to take this to 8 o'clock and probably not much longer because I still need to cook dinner for myself tonight. But yeah, so it'd be half an hour of lessons and half an hour of live Q&A. So if y'all have questions, please leave them in the chat. If anybody wants to help out the channel as well, I would really appreciate it if you would use the super chat function. That is that button that looks like a dollar sign that's down in the corner of the chat. Doing that helps out the channel. It comes directly to me, which is awesome. YouTube doesn't take a cut of that, I don't believe. So it's super helpful. Also, a huge thank you to Ultra Poi for sponsoring this here live stream. If y'all want to grab a set of their Orb Poi or the brand new Helix Poi Pro, which they just sent me the other day, you can do so by heading on over to ultrapoi.com and using the promo code DirectFactor with a 0 instead of an O at checkout. That gets you a discount on your Poi, and it helps out the channel as well. So, Tina P.P. Ditlevson says, you are actually the very first English-speaking person to pronounce my name perfectly. That's great to hear. I guarantee you, at some point tonight, I will not, however. So I'm glad I'm ahead. Oh, and actually, it looks like my audio is clipping just a little bit every once in a while. Okay, if that becomes a problem, let me know in the chat because I can adjust the volume level of the mic. I'm running off of my AirPods here. So yeah, just let me know in the chat if that becomes a problem. Doesn't appear to be clipping right now, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that it stays that way, right? Right. All right, well, let's get started. Y'all came here to learn some poi, so let's learn some poi now, shall we? All right. So, stacking, dear friends. There's a lot of different variations on stacking. This was the first horizontal stack. What we're going to be covering tonight is mostly horizontal stacks. Actually, I think it's going to be all horizontal stacks now that I think of it. So this is a pattern that Ivan Melgorbanoff was showing off in a tech video more than 10 years ago called Red Pants. This led to a whole framework for understanding this type of poi trick, where we're looking to create these solid horizontal lines between the poi as we move our hands back and forth doing stalls and pendulums, right? There's another variation that I think actually Mel was doing it in that same video, but I associate this with my friend Charlie Cushing because he was the first one that I really noticed doing it and that it really clicked for me that I was seeing a stack with it, you know? There's a whole bunch of different combinations of these that you can do. Leo Akaza has done a lot of work on this. I did a pretty comprehensive video showing a bunch of different combinations of these and everything. I'm trying to train myself out of saying and everything as like kind of my nervous tick. So caught myself saying it once. Let's see how many times I say it tonight. Anywho, so horizontal stacking, it's a lot of fun, but there are some specific things that I tend to do when I put my stacks together, and I want to share my secrets with all of you tonight. Yes? Excellent. So first and foremost, we have to talk about the two most important pieces of horizontal stacks, which are pendulums and top stalls. Now, you can do horizontal stacks that do not involve top stalls, but most of the horizontal stacks that I perform myself do involve those top stalls, whether it be Charlie's version or whether it be Mel's version. Those top stalls become a really integral part of the move. Yeah. I have plenty of tutorials out there on top stalls, but the thing that I think is really the tip that helped me out more than anything else when learning how to do top stalls myself and making them clean, is that there's actually a little bit of an illusion that's going on whenever we do a top stall. We see it as being this moment, drop this one, when we have the poi kind of straight out horizontal from our hand. What if I told you that to get that lovely line, you actually want to aim to have your hand just an inch or two above the position of the poi. So rather than here, the hand winds up here, like so. Now, I'm guessing as I do that, A, it's happening quickly enough that it doesn't really register that it's not perfectly horizontal. And B, it's one of those things that what you pay attention to is the fact that the poi has a little minute of hang time there, where you're able to get the impression to the audience that top stall is happening, and you're getting that, and they think they're getting that nice little horizontal line and everything. There, I said it twice. I should have a little swear jar for every time I drop and then everything. But it also gives you like an extra half a second to get your hand in and out of the stall, which helps you out controlling it. This, of course, is true whether you're using your left hand or your right hand, either one. Now, this is going to fly somewhat in the opposition of the other trick that's a core trick, the other thing that's a core part of doing a horizontal stack, which is doing a pendulum. Now, most of us, when we first start learning how to do pendulums, kind of do them half-heartedly, where just so long as the poi head doesn't go above our hand, we call it good, right? Now, the problem is, of course, with this pendulum that I'm doing right here, I'm winding up in that position where my hand is slightly above the poi. Problem is, this doesn't work as well with the pendulum. You actually want to get the poi head completely even with your hand on either side. This actually requires putting a little bit more energy into it, and you kind of have to find this middle ground between enough energy to get the poi over your hand versus having enough energy to at least get it up high enough to be horizontal, like even horizontally with your hand on either side, right? Okay, so how do we make these two things work together? Well, as you can see, if you look very, very closely as I'm doing the Charlie stack right here, you'll actually see they aren't doing the same thing. I'm getting one of the poi with my hand slightly above it, doing the top stall, and the other poi and hand that are perfectly even. Here's the thing, what your audience is looking at are the poi heads. They're not really looking at your tethers. Now this does change if you're using sock poi, but I'm using contact poi right now. So just so long as the heads wind up more or less in the same spot, as far as the audience is concerned, it's right. They don't even notice that the position of the two tethers don't really match up, or at least they're off enough that it might be noticeable, right? And of course, like if I wanted to, I could fight to get the hands and poi in the same position on either side, but the problem there becomes that the top stall gets a little bit less predictable, and the hands are more noticeably different then, because in order to get a perfectly horizontal top stall, I need to change my grip on the poi and wind up in this spot where I'm kind of like having my thumb point up towards the ceiling. So if you watch me do those two together when I'm shooting for the perfect top stall, you'll note that my hands no longer line up. Whereas if I'm doing the kind of hand goes above the top stall version of this, the hands look a lot closer to matching up. It's a very, very weird contradiction, but there it is. What can I say here? So biggest things you want to drill in order to start getting your horizontal stacks down. Get those top stalls nice and clean with that position where your hand is just slightly above the position of the poi, like so. So you've got like an extra half second hang time there. And also practice your pendulums so that you're getting your poi head up even with your hand on each side. I'm asking two different things from these tricks, I know, but trust me, it does actually make everything look better when you can do both of these things, even though they are slightly different depending upon, I guess, the way you're trying to arrive at a particular point, right? Okay, so let's dive into a couple stacks now. Um, I, for my money, this is really like the horizontal stack. This is the one that started the entire craze. It's the one that Mel was showing off in red pants. And it is also the stack that I see people struggling with the most. Why is that? Well, let me show you. If you're like most people, you try and do the stack the first time like this. Now, what's going wrong here? Well, it's that you're treating each end like it's flower petals rather than really stalls. So if you note, when I go up and around, I'm kind of like, instead of doing the stall and pendulum back and forth and everything, I'm treating it like it's a little flower petal where my hand kind of stops and then the pendulum goes back and everything. And of course, the thing that really makes this a problem then is that we only get the line of the, oof, excuse me, we only really get the line of the poi on either side of our body. We don't get that nice crisp in between line. This to me is what really makes the pattern pop. This is what makes it feel distinctive. So how do we get that? Well, we have to will ourselves to stop. Like, the reason that this happens is we want this to feel like a smooth pattern. We want it to feel as though, we can just slide back and forth between things. And we really have to think of the stack as each hand having one, two, three, four specific arrival points. Pardon me. There is stall, pendulum, pendulum, stall. And we really we can't skip any one of those points. It's not hand goes around and comes back. It really truly is stall, stall, pendulum, pendulum. I kind of think of this as being analogous to like locking in the dance world, where you're trying to hit those poses, and it's really important that you find that point and you find the stillness in that point, right? So it's stop, stop, stop. Each of these is like the end point of a piece of movement. They're not all one continuous movement. If you try to do it as one continuous movement, you wind up getting flower petals, and that's not what we're trying to get here. So think point, 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 point. Whenever people ask me if I've got this right, the answer I always give them is, do you have the poi meeting together in the middle? Because in my mind, without that point where they kind of lock in together, it's not right. Unless you get that nice clean moment there, it isn't right. And as you can see, it's sometimes even a struggle for me to maintain it because the timing is such that it's really easy to get even slightly off with it. It's not just a matter of like getting the start, stop kind of feeling to it. You also have to be really precise in aiming your stalls in order to really make that crisp line happen. Like, as you can see, there have been a number of these where I've had just one poise slightly above the other one, and I'm trying real hard to make them land right in a row, like there, 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 there. Yeah, you see? Um, so, like, I guess the best advice I can give here is to not only think of each of these points as being a discrete, separate segment of movement that has a start and a finish, start, finish, start, finish. But also that you want to try and aim those stalls in the middle to try and make sure that those poi line up as precisely as you can possibly get them. You're almost trying to hit them with each other right there in the middle. It is definitely a balancing act, to say the least. Cool. So now let's talk a little bit about levels. Um, so when Mel first showed off this stack, he did it. So I have been doing it at about eye level, simply because with the way the camera is pointed and everything, that's where you're going to get the best view of this. When Mel showed it off for the first time, he was doing it at about the top of his head level. So as you can see, it's kind of like slightly off screen and everything. which I apologize for, but honestly, that's the height I prefer to see this stack at. The reason being that I think it creates really pleasing lines in both the arms as well as the poi, because the orientation of the poi is definitely something that we're looking for to really nail this here and everything. But if you bring out the length of your arms just a little bit and have the poi going just above eye level, you get this nice amount of negative space between your arms and your head that I think contributes to the presentation of the trick. I really, here, I'm going to get down a little lower here so I'm able to show you this and keep it on screen and everything. Does everybody see how every time I go up to either side, I wind up in this place right here where I kind of like have this pocket of negative space between my head and my arms and everything? I said it again, that's 3 times. This to me is kind of the ideal presentation of this move, which is strange because it puts it out of alignment with a lot of the other tricks that you could match it up with. Like, for instance, a lot of people have noted a transition I love to do with this one is to go into Tricatcher versus Pendulum. And the thing is that that point in Tricatcher versus Pendulum, where you have the two poi pointing away from each other over on the left-hand side, that doesn't happen up here. It happens about shoulder level if you're doing the trick in kind of a more classic orientation a la Ronin, right? So you actually kind of have to fudge it going from above your head to when you bring it back around, it's going to be more or less even with your shoulders. And then if you want to go back, of course, you kind of have to like leave your hands hovering up at about head height. This is in marked contrast to how I like to do the Charlie stall. You can do the Charlie stall with those same lines, but for this one, I actually prefer to make it happen at shoulder height. Why is that? Because more often I switch into flowers from this stack. Or I'll do things like a plane break, for example. And of course, there's the variation of this that happens on centerline and everything, which is useful for all kinds of stuff. But, as opposed to this Mel stack, where I feel like the negative space is really part of what makes it, for this stack, where you get the two poi coming inward to meet each other and everything, I think that the possibilities for transitions that you can get off of those points outweighs any potential sacrifice that you lose by losing the negative space. And of course, it becomes one of those things that as you're switching back and forth between those, anything that you do with flowers, for example, is going to stick you right back in that spot where you can switch back. Um, there's also something to be said for the fact that there's a danger of like obscuring your face with this one if you keep it at shoulder level. I don't worry so much about that, but for those of you out there who might want to take photographs like this and everything, it's worth considering that you might want to give it a little bit of a reach out to either side to make sure that your facial features are still clear while performing this. Yeah? Cool. So there are uses for doing that Mel stack a little lower. For example, there's a great spot where you can switch into horizontal planes right there if you were to instead perform it at shoulder height. I don't really do that transition very often, and personally, I find doing this at shoulder height kind of unnecessarily challenging in a lot of ways. I mean, I suppose I could do like one of these horizontal transitions over here or over here, and that's always fun. Um, but I just don't like losing that lovely negative space in the process. I don't have enough transitions from the positions in the Mel stack at shoulder level for me to want to give up having it occur at the higher level. So this actually gives you some options because, of course, you can play around with stuff on a high level and then switch to a lower level as kind of a dynamic move and switch, of course, back up. I'm always a fan of level changes. Always, always, always. Um, Yeah, so I think that's the tips that I got for y'all tonight. Just to summarize where we have gone thus far, um, most important things to practice for horizontal stacks. Get down your top stalls. Make sure that you're using that position where your hand is just slightly above the position of the poi. That helps give you a couple extra seconds of hang time. And by the same token, when you're doing your pendulums, make sure that the poi head is getting up to hand height on either side. That is going to help nail those moments where the poi heads meet together. And especially if you're doing these with contact poi, having that thing where the heads meet together is probably the most important part of creating that shape. Um, in addition, when you're doing the original Mel stack, do it up high so that you get that nice negative space between your arms and your head. And also think of each segment of it as a discrete piece of movement that has a start and a stop so that you get those nice, clean, horizontal lines every step of the way because they look absolutely gorgeous. And finally, when it comes to the Charlie stack, as I like to call it, feel free to bring this one down a little bit lower because you can do some pretty cool things when you do that at shoulder level, like so. Sweet. So let's dive into some Q&A then, dear friends. Please fill that chat up with some questions. Ooh, lolly. Cool, cool, cool. Oh, and also before we dive into questions, another thank you to UltraPoi for sponsoring this live stream. You can grab a set of any set of UltraPoi's poi. These are their orb poi, contact poi. Over at ultrapoi.com, please use the promo code DrexFactor with a 0 instead of an O. That will get you a discount on your unset of poi, and even better, it helps out the channel, so everybody wins. Thank you once again, UltraPoi, for sponsoring this live stream. All right, now let me dig in here. Send me in those questions, dear friends. Send me in those questions. Mortal says, I can hear you fine. That's great. Lucas Souza, I'm a big fan of your work. Yay, I'm glad to hear that. Kurt Hobbs, have you watched Dune yet? No, I haven't. There's a 50-50 chance I'll wind up seeing it tomorrow night. If I can totally like throw out any little bit of geek cred I have ever had, I don't actually like Dune. I remember reading it in college, and it's one of those things that a lot of the more interesting ideas from Dune have gotten repurposed in other science fiction, and so it doesn't feel as fresh to me as I'm sure it was when it was first published. But even more than that, it does this thing that just drives me crazy when like there's a thing that authors will sometimes do where they have action occurring off a page. And the ways that we find out about that action is that they will have the characters talking about that action rather than dropping the reader into the action. And Dune does that so many times. It was so frustrating to me. So I've never been a fan of the book. The David Lynch movie is really interesting, probably more so just because I dig David Lynch as a director, which should also be said. Denny, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, Villeneuve or something like that. I'm not good with French, but I've really liked his movies too, so I'm probably gonna watch it just to see him in action and everything. But yeah, a geek cred card revoked. I know I've never been much of a Dune fan. But yeah, there's talk of some friends getting together to stream it tomorrow night, so we shall see if that comes together. I tell you, the movie I really want to see right now is I absolutely love the work of Edgar Wright, the guy who directed Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and Baby Driver, and of course Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And he's got a new movie out this season called Last Night in Soho, which I don't think comes out in the United States just yet, but I think it has opened in the UK. That movie I really, really, really want to see. I'm really looking forward to that one. But yes, Dune will happen. It will. It's just a question of when. Animum Nox. Oh, by the way, hi Kurt. I really enjoy it every time you show up for one of these. Animum Nox, what are your favorite entries and exits for two poi, one hand? Oh, that's a great question. Let me switch back over to full screen here, or I should say full body. Okay, so my favorite entries for two poi, one hand. The first one actually is just to like pass the poi back and forth as I'm in the middle of the 3-beat weave. So in this position right here where I have my left hand underneath my right hand, I just reach out with my right hand's pinky and ring fingers and just like hook that, hook the handle from the left hand and boom, I'm there. Another one I really enjoy. This is actually an exercise that I think I gave this to the flow circle at one point. But it's essentially to go from these kind of split time same direction up and down stalls, and then switch into a reverse 4-beat thumb bled weave. So how that works is basically like this is actually spoilers. The tutorial for this is coming to my Instagram next week. But this is a pair of split time same direction up down stalls that I really associate with Rast Axel. Um, and like it's literally just going from here. And what happens is as the downstalling hand goes up and the upstalling hand goes down, I let the hand coming out of the downstall reach around and hook the handle of the poi that was pointed up, like so, like so. So it's as it comes up and around, it hooks the other handle, and we are into two poi one hand land. Trying to think of what are some other ones I really like. There's one that I have not been able to get consistent yet, and that is to basically do a no beat toss, but it's like as an extension going up high and everything. And the theory is that as that's happening, I can catch it with the pinky of my other hand and switch directly into a one-handed Mercedes. I have tried a few times now to get this in one of my monthly flow videos, and I've never been able to get it cleanly on camera. It is still a work in progress, but I think the potential there is pretty rad, personally. I also like, I guess sometimes I'll do like from a float throw. I do that pretty rarely. There are some that I've been working on that I think have the potential to be really cool. One of which is to go from these kind of isolated throws where one is going one direction and the other is going the other direction, and to reach one hand in there and to catch, whoops, both at the same time. Cannot get that one consistently, but goodness, is it going to be cool when I can. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any others. You know, at one point I just gave up on the idea of like coming up with like really cool and flourishy entries, and I just passed my left hand poi over to the pinky end of my right hand, and I don't really make a big fuss out of it. And I know that that is not exactly a satisfying answer, but 9 times out of 10, that's how I do it. I just pass it over and everything. Could probably get into it from like a contact roll. I don't know, I haven't tried that one very much yet. But honestly, just like passing that poi back and forth is how I do it 9 times out of 10. So yeah, maybe I should come up with some cooler flourishes for that. Good question. Switch back here. All right. Could you break down the Charlie stack a little more? Oh, sorry. Let me back up for just 1 second here. Amygdalism. Can't wait to start practicing these stacks. Thanks. Excellent. Amygdalism. Oh, I was just going to ask Animal's question too. Sweet. I'm glad I got both of you then. Mordecall asks, could you break down the Charlie stack a little bit more? That seemed really interesting. And also Tina PP Ditlevsen, whose name I am going to mispronounce sometime tonight, if I haven't already, is apparently a big fan of Shaun of the Dead too, which just goes to tell me that you have amazing taste. Cool. Yes, I can break down the Charlie stack for you. Keep those questions coming. Keep those questions coming. All right, so Cliff's notes on how to do the Charlie stall. So what's going on here is essentially you are, yeah. Oh, pardon me. Y'all aren't boring me. It's just been a long day. So the pattern for this looks like this, I think. Sorry, give me 1 second to refresh on this. Okay, I lied. Okay, so it's almost exactly the same thing as the Mel stall, except instead of doing 2 top stalls with the pendulum, you do top stall out to like a broad pendulum. You could also think of this as being like half of a 1-petal in-spin flower instead of half of a 2-petal in-spin flower. So when you're doing the Mel pattern, you're basically breaking apart the bottom half of a 2-petal in-spin flower, and the Charlie stack is going to be the bottom half of a 1-petal in-spin flower. Yeah. So we have our pedal, and then we go out, comes back, goes back out, top stall, and pendulum, pendulum, top stall, pendulum, or excuse me, top stall, I guess it's more of an extension, pendulum, pendulum, top stall, back to pendulum, back, back, top stall, pendulum, back, back. So the key here is that when you're reaching over to native side, you are trying to have the poi essentially work as an extension. It's going to be straight out from your arm going to your native side. Yeah. You only try to curl the poi in and do that top stall when it's on non-native side. Yeah. So non-native, native, pendulum. You're going to be doing the pendulums on your native side, back and forth like that. Yeah. So then it just becomes a matter of synchronizing your hands up together. So I guess it doesn't really matter. So actually, yeah, this works just as well, is to go from having the poi do pendulums in and out, and from the inward section, there we go. Try and see if you can get the 2 poi to meet up in the middle. You really want to see if you can get them to both point at you at the same time. It's always helpful to keep in mind where you want the poi to arrive in the course of the stack. And of course, like, you know, the Mel stack has this middle spot right here where you're trying to get the poi to match up as well. The Charlie stack doesn't work the same way. In fact, the Charlie stack is a little weird because the only place where you get that alignment is when your hands match up with each other on either side. Technically speaking, you could look at this open position right here as being the poi lining up on a horizontal line as well before coming in to point at you. And that way, it's kind of like the inverse of the Mel pattern, where that middle spot is the 2 poi pointing in towards you. With the Charlie pattern, it's the 2 of them pointed out away from you. But you get the poi kind of curling in at you on either side in order to complete that stack. So to review, the pattern is you do top stall, swing out, pendulum, pendulum, top stall, pendulum, 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 going back and forth, yeah? And you just mesh up your hands doing that. You are always reaching out in that broad pendulum on your native side, or I guess I should call it an extension or extendulum here. So native side, you have point out, and then pendulum to curl it back in to meet with the other poi doing a top stall. Yeah. I have tutorials on how to do that too, so you can go check those out on my list of tutorials on my channel. If you want a little bit more detail on that, where I'm not just doing it off the top of my head, you know. Cool. And Knox says, your answer was very helpful. Thank you very much. Can you also talk about some ways to exit 2.1 hand? Actually, like, I have way more fun with the exits. Let me show you all the exits I can do from 2.1 hand. What a great question. Let me switch back here. Okay, so exits from 2.1 hand. I know many of these. So the easiest exit, of course, is just to do the opposite of what I did to get into them, which is just pass that pinky end poi back over to the other hand. But let's face it, it's a little dull, isn't it? So from a weave like this, the most common way I get out is, honestly, I will release the pinky end poi right here in front of me into a little toss, and I'll just like make the catch as it comes around. There's a way to do this that my former partner Morgan was really a fan of, to release it into a contact roll. It's hard. It's so hard to get the timing on this right. So once again, you're waiting for the 2 poi to be in front of your body here. You release that pinky end poi and you try and make it land in cradle. Because this is such a tight move, I have a really hard time making the catch on this dependable. I have a much easier time doing this from a one-handed butterfly. From a one-handed butterfly, I can put a little bit less oomph on the poi. And of course, now that I'm trying it on camera, it doesn't work. This is partially because my ceilings are a little low. So I'm just a little bit anxious about letting it pop too much. But yeah, it's... I feel like the contact rolls I get out of a one-handed butterfly are a little bit more controlled than those that I get out of that one-handed out of the forwards meteor weave. And of course, like this same example I showed you of how to get in and out of those reverse 4-beat thumb lead weaves also carries with it the exit, which is simply that as you come back around in front here and everything, as the pinky end is coming over, you just pass it over to the other hand and stall it down to get into that nice little up-down stall in the middle there. Goodness, what else? I do so many tosses out of one-handed moves that, like, especially out of the one-handed butterflies at this point, I'm so used to like tossing the pinky end as it's going up over to my left side and then catching the handle. Like I pretty much got that so much on lock at this point that I rarely have to think about it to do it anymore. I'm trying to think of what are some other options here. Bunch of different throws into contact rolls, into actually, let me see if I can do this one just to like totally rub it in here and like do it as a behind the back throw. I don't have enough room to try that in here tonight, unfortunately, but you can also turn that into a behind the back catch for sure. Oh, and I suppose like there's all my horizontal plane stuff too, where like I'll take a one-handed corkscrew and turn that into a horizontal, either a two-handed corkscrew or like horizontal isolations like this. And again, that's generally just done by kind of like passing that pinky end poi over to my left hand to get it into that spot. So yeah, passing and throwing are kind of the two primary ways I get back out of it. There's more creative possibilities out there. These are just like the ones that I find myself defaulting to because I've got them so much in muscle memory at this point that they feel very natural to me. I very rarely try and put the hardest thing I know how to do on camera simply because I prefer the stuff that like I can really just like let loose on and everything and feel comfortable with. So yeah, those are some possibilities. Keep those questions coming, dear friends. We got about 15 minutes left in this live stream. And if any of you would be so kind as to support the channel with Super Chat, I would really appreciate it. That's that little, it's that little button that looks like a dollar sign in the chat. I will prioritize your question, answering it first, and it also helps out the channel. So yes, thank you. Oh, Tina PP Ditlevson says, I am realizing I have so much to learn. I can't wait to practice this stuff. Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. I have rather embarrassingly forgotten most of the poi that I have learned over the years. There have been many, many, many cases where I have run into people at festivals who will come up to me and be like, I want to do this one trick that you were showing off in Tech Blog 248. And I will just be all like, I do not remember that at all. I feel a little bad when that happens, but I guess there's worse ways that could suss out. It just means that I've had a lot of time to work on what I think is the cool stuff that I want to hold on to for sure. Yeah, and Knox, thanks for those great ideas. You're so welcome. Mortikal asks, any tips for cleaning up a folding line? I always seem to lose control after the elbow pinch, transferring to the other side. Yes. I don't know if you have worked off of this hint already, but folding lines are body tracers. You have to think of them as such. A folding line is basically the same thing as a snake. Let me pull back out to full screen, or full body to show you that. Okay, so starting off, let me just show you, if you take a snake around your shoulder, install it in front of you, and then around your shoulder, install it back out, around your shoulder, install it in front, around your shoulder, install it back out, and look at it from the side as I'm doing this. So it starts on the back side of my arm, winds up on the front, goes back to the back. This is what a folding line is doing. You want to try and see if you can get the tether to roll back and forth from behind to in front of you and back again in order to get that folding line down. If the trouble you're running into is keeping it stable once you make that transition, believe me, I get it. I kind of fudge this, and my friends who are really into contact juggling are kind of angry with me about this. And basically what happens is as soon as it reaches that elbow joint, as I'm moving my forearm around, I'm actually pinning the poi head between my forearm and my chest. Look very carefully here. I pin it as it comes around, and that helps me to keep it stable as it's going back and forth. Whoop. I'll show you that from the side. So as it goes around, I pin it, and that helps me keep it stable. I, whoops, try to do it the right way. I pin it, and it helps keep it stable, yeah? Technically speaking, if you're gonna do it the right way, it should never wind up on your chest. I also find it tremendously difficult to keep it stable. And I've been using my chest to kind of stabilize this move for so long that I have a hard time making the line fold without touching the poi to my chest. It feels very foreign and strange to me. I can do it, but does your audience know the difference between, hang on, does your audience, of course, I'm trying to do it dependently. Does your audience know the difference between that and that? I'm going to say no. Your audience does not know the difference. So be easy on yourself. Hand it up against your chest. It'll help. Trust me. It'll stabilize it. Um, Meanwhile, all of the contact point nerds in the chat are frothing at the mouth this very moment for having me show you that. Sorry. Let me see here. Cool. So I hope that helps out more to call. Animum Knox asks, do you feel comfortable to spend fire again outside of your apartment? Kind of. I've had friends reaching out to me to try and have a fire night before the weather gets too cold. For those of you that don't know, part of the subtext here is that the apartment across from mine in this complex burned down several months ago. And it really, really, really spooked me. I have not spun fire much back there since, and I'm kind of nervous about spinning fire because I think it's going to make the neighbors nervous too. They have reconstructed the roof on the building so it no longer looks like the ruins of an apartment building. And they're in the process of reconstructing the apartment. I think, yeah, I should try to host another fire night back there and just kind of like get myself over that hump and everything. It'll be a lot easier once that apartment has been rebuilt completely, but I don't think it's going to be rebuilt completely before the end of the year, unfortunately. So I think I'm just going to have to grin and bear it. So I've got ideas for 2 different fire videos that I want to try and get done before the end of the year, but ironically enough, neither one of them requires that space behind my apartment. So we'll see is the short answer. We'll see. Sarah Winter says, polyrhythms, your favorite patterns and how they connect to one another or basic moves. Oh, goodness. Do we have that much time tonight? Oh, yay. Thank you, Morticall. Thank you. Penning it helped out a bunch. Oh, sweet. You tried it? Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Don't tell the contact point nerds that I gave you that piece of advice. Seriously, like the purists really, really hate this. I remember when I first learned how to do my folding lines and like the first fire festival that I went to and I showed it off to people, like there were 2 people in particular who were so upset with me about this. Like, that's not a real folding line kind of thing. And it's like, looks real to me, looks real to the audience. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. So I'm glad it helped. I'm really glad that it helped. Sarah Winter also says, thank you for doing this. Love these streams. P.S. I look forward to a time where I can afford your Patreon. Cool. I look forward to that time as well. Cool. So polyrhythms. Oh, wow. How did it get to be 7:53 already? Okay. So I'm only going to be on here for another 8 minutes. So get those questions in while you can. Get those questions in while you can. Okay. I'm going to give you the short version of my favorite polyrhythms and how they fit together. That actually might make for a really good video in itself. All right, so favorite polyrhythms. So just on the face of it, my favorite polyrhythms, the Mercedes, of course. Also, static spin versus triquetra. Oh, you know what's going to make this real fun? You know what some of my favorite polyrhythms are? My gunslinger anti-brids. So there's a fun exercise I've been doing lately. This isn't an anti-brid, but it's just a 10-pedal gunslinger versus an extension, going around back and forth and switching up which hand is doing the gunslinger and which hand is doing the extension, just because my left hand really needs work on its gunslinger flowers. Yeah, this one is really, really fun. I'm a huge fan of this one. And of course, you know, I'm doing it as kind of an exercise where I'm going back and forth. So I guess we could call this a transition between the 2, right? Where basically what's happening is, so after I complete an extension, I let my poi kind of, actually, I continue that movement around to do my wrap entry as the other hand does a spiral wrap and returns to normal grip. So I take it around, switch, take it around, switch, take it around, switch. And then of course, I do this all the time. I keep thinking people are going to get sick of it, and maybe they are, who knows, but doing a 10 pedal gunslinger anti-brid, that is gunslinger versus static spin, switching into isolation versus 6 pedal gunslinger. Both of these are polyrhythms, and they're pretty easy to transition to because it's literally just going from a static spin to an isolation over here on the side of me and switching up the size of the gunslinger that I'm doing, going from the 10 pedal, which is really just a gunslinger waist strap, where I'm going up and down with it, and then switching it into a 6 pedal, which, you know, a 6 pedal gunslinger is really just a pinky led 2-beat back and forth that you're moving around in a circle. So go with, pardon me, I missed the grip. 10 pedal versus static. Goodness. There we go. 10 pedal versus static. 6 pedal versus ISO. 10 pedal versus static. 6 pedal versus ISO. You're welcome. Cool. I want to leave enough time for a couple other questions here. People want to get them in before I wrap this up. All right. Tina says, most of the time my audience hasn't even seen poi before. Brilliant. So they really won't care about pinning the poi head. Fantastic. More to call. Secret is safe. Glad to hear it. Juan Gallardo says, what about spinning from front to behind the back? You mean how to get into behind the back? I actually just did a combo showing that off, but oh, Sarah Winter says it's so neat. I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you liked it. But I can give you some quick Cliff's notes and point you in the direction of that video. But I'm going to switch back to full body for a second. So honestly, my favorite way of getting into behind the back is like whichever side I'm going to go into behind the back from, that hand just kind of hangs out there for an extra beat while the other hand reaches behind there and completes that work. So it's like, as I'm doing my normal weave and everything, right hand hangs out for an extra beat so that the left hand can reach around back behind, yeah? And likewise, when you're doing, say, like a meltdown and everything, right hand, or excuse me, now it's the left hand is going to hang out while the right hand goes behind. The trick to this is actually that there's less going on there than you think. Whenever you go into behind the back, you know, the audience is so focused on the hand that is going behind the back that doesn't really pay attention to what the hand that is not going behind the back is doing. And usually that just means that it's hanging out in its same like little 2-beat of whatever it was doing beforehand. This works for meltdowns, this works for behind the back waist straps, behind the back weaves, you name it. It's actually a remarkably simple trick. And I would highly recommend, I think I uploaded it last month. I did a combo tutorial showing a few transitions using this style to get into behind the back tricks. So I highly recommend you check that out. We're getting down to the last couple minutes here, friends. Anybody wants to try and get 1 or 2 more questions in under the wire, and we'll see if I can answer them. Animum Knox, thank you so much for the opportunity to ask those questions. Really appreciate it. You're so welcome. Sarah Winter, thanks. All that's neat. I'm glad to hear it. Tina, you're in Denmark. This must be so late at night for you. I appreciate you staying up with us. How much experience did you have when you first started teaching professionally? That's a good question. I mean, I had never like taught professionally before, but I had been spinning poi at that point for close to a year and a half. And that really happened because people watched what I was doing and they asked me to teach them. It wasn't one of those things that I set up shop and said, okay, I'm a teacher now. I only did that once I had a big enough volume of people coming to me asking me for help that I started setting up shop. So um, the short the short answer is not much, but apparently more than the people I was teaching. Take from that what you will. Sarah Winter, can't wait to give those moves a try. Glad to hear it. Kel Montgomery, thanks so much for all the amazing tips. Can't wait to get practicing those stacks. Yay! I'm glad to hear that. Juan Gallardo, that really helps a lot. Thanks. You are so very welcome. So very welcome. Um, cool. Well, it is 8 o'clock, friends. So I'm going to give you my wrap here. If anybody, again, wants to get in one or two last questions before I shut this down. Oh, Tina, I'm asking about the teaching because there is literally no one teaching this in my language. And when I train, I often have local kids coming up to me asking to learn. And it sounds like you're ready to teach. Um, I will tell you that teaching is a skill that has to be learned like any other skill. And when you start off, you're going to be terrible at it, and that's okay. Um, what I recommend is that as you get into starting to teach people, ask them for feedback on a frequent basis. Like every time somebody comes and takes a class from me, I send them a little Google form that is a feedback form that asks questions like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do as a teacher? On a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do at presenting these concepts? On a scale of 1 to 5, how inspired do you feel to try some other things? What were the things I did that worked? What were the things I did that didn't work? Um, do you have any suggestions for me as to ways that I can change my approach to this? Yeah, it really comes down to feedback and learning iteratively. Um, you have to think of teaching as something that you practice just as much as your poi. And just as you get feedback from your poi of like, you haven't got the trick yet, you have to take feedback from your students to figure out how to improve as a teacher. Um, that would be my advice to you getting started in that. It sounds like you've already got people coming up to you asking you. That's a great first step. Um, think of it as a work in progress. And I absolutely believe that there's nobody else teaching poi in your language, and there probably should be. So why not you? Yeah. Cool. Oh, it is 2 a.m. Fair enough. Fair enough. Awesome, friends. Well, we are at 3 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and wind this down. Thank you all for tuning in and chatting with me tonight. Once again, thank you to UltraPoi for sponsoring this live stream. Head on over to UltraPoi, use the promo code DrexFactor with a 0 instead of an O. I'm going to drop that into the chat right this very moment. Cool. That helps out the channel. Please do it. Yeah, they have more options than these orb poi. I'm going to be reviewing a new set of poi from them in the coming couple months. But yeah, thanks y'all for hanging out with me on a Friday night. And yeah, I'm going to go cook myself some dinner and watch some Young Justice as well. Um, Also, if anybody wants to, please sign up for my Patreon. That is what keeps that's what keeps the trains running around here. Patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm going to call it a night. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody, and I will see you on the next live stream. These always happen the third Friday of the month. So keep your eyes peeled because the next one will be, it looks like November 19th, if I'm reading it properly. Yeah, Tina says, wow, I love that. I will absolutely do that. I love to teach generally, but I never thought about doing the feedback that way. Yeah, taking feedback like that will make you so much better a teacher. It'll like, I cannot even begin to tell you how many things I have learned from taking feedback from my students. They've taken my workshops from a place where they were good to where they were great. And it is my students' feedback that helped me get there. Yeah. Awesome, friends. I'm going to go ahead and say good evening And have a good weekend. Make sure you get out and flow. And I will see you. I got a new video coming out on Monday, so I'll see you then. Peace.